by the time I was 11, then I was going multiple times a week. So by the time I was like 11 and a half, Jerry was kind of like, well, do you want to work here? And as I'll pay you in comics. And I was like, okay, I get to stay in the comic book store all the time and get paid in comics. That sounds great. And then as I got a little bit older, I was like, well, wait a second, I should really be making some money off of this instead of just spending money on just getting paid in comics. So Jerry, being the smart guy that he was like, oh yeah, I'll pay you instead, knowing full well that I would just spend all the money on comics. So that's exactly. So it really didn't matter whether I got free comics or I got paid. It all went to, my efforts all went towards comics. One of the interesting parts of my journey is that, again, like I said, I came from a single parent family. As hard as it might be to believe now, I was kind of an introverted kid. I was very quiet. Didn't have a lot of friends. Didn't really speak to a lot of people when I was outside. It just wasn't who I was at the time. Going into the comic book store on a weekly basis, on a regular basis, which eventually became a daily, I would spend every hour that I was not in school and not home, I would spend in the store if the store was open, weekends, Saturdays, Sundays. I was among my people. I could have those conversations about, who's stronger, Superman or the Hulk, which, by the way, we all know it's Superman. Or, who, especially at the time, big debate was, what's the better team, the X-Men or Teen Titans? Or
we all know the answer to that question.
We know it's
X-Men.
Teen Titans.
Incorrect, sir.
We're going to just have to agree to disagree. And I was able to have, and what was also different about the comic book store is there was people from every different age level. There was, I grew up in a traditionally not super diverse neighborhood in Brooklyn, but the store was diverse, right? A lot of people who came into the store were people of color and things like that. So I got to experience a lot of different types of people also through the store. And eventually, like, I just found my voice. Like, I found the ability to be able to have a conversation, not be scared to voice my opinion, not be worried about, being happy and being joyful about what I'm talking about, and just kind of reveling in the whole thing, which eventually led me to being, some semblance of the Mike Negin that today, which is very loud and very, very talkative and very opinionated. But it didn't start that way.
Let me stop you there because
Sure.
I want to dig into this a little bit more. What I find fascinating is that as an adult, you can look back at this time and go, that was when this happened. Has that always been the case? Like, do you remember getting to a point in your career and looking back and going, if I hadn't been going to that comic shop, I don't know where I would be?
I had that self-realization very early in life, probably around the latter end of my teenage years, maybe early 20s, where I just kind of realized, like, this is what's defined me. At one point I was at a point in my life where I was like, for good or for bad, this is what kind of has defined me. Now at the age of 50, I've realized that it's for good. But there was a point then I was like, is this a sad story? Is this the idea that this poor little boy was defined by these fictional characters? And in the end, I realized it was a great story, because my story could have been very different. I had the realization that, again, relatively early on, that I could have either stayed that introverted kid who could barely read and probably in a neighborhood that there was plenty of trouble to get into. I probably would have gotten into some trouble. And I think that it like I said, it defined my values. I could have been a different person based on the family I had and the surroundings I had in my environment. I could have been a much more difficult, angry person, but I didn't let myself become that, mainly because I wanted to live up to these ideals of these fictional characters. And again, there was a point in my life I was like, that might have been sad, but I I know now, especially, that it's not. It's, every person gets to find in different ways, nature versus nurture, whatever you believe in. Um, I'm happy with the fact that these things, Star Wars, comics, whatever it is, made me the person that I am today. When you go through it, it feels like the most crushing thing, to be, we were poor as a family when we were kids. When I was a kid, I don't have no siblings, so it was me. I was alone with my mom. Like I said, she wasn't around a lot. From a young age, I was alone. I was kind of a latchkey kid, had to take care of myself. These were also these fictional characters were also my only friends, my only family, and I grew a great attachment to them. Um, which, again, at certain points in my life, felt kind of detrimental. But then at a later point, I was like, these are all the blocks that helped build me to the person that I am today.
So, in an alternate reality, Mike Negin obviously takes over the Canarsie books and comics, and that's the end of the story. But in this one, we all grow up. We put childish things aside, as it were. When you went to college and you're working your way through, what made you land on IT? And it can be a simple enough answer. It can be, well, that's where people were hiring. But like, was there a passion that drew you to it, or was it really just like, hey, this is the way to do things. This is how I'm going to get a job.
Well, it's interesting because it kind of ties in a little bit in that I grew up in the dawning of the age of personal computing and personal video games, right? Atari 2600, Commodore 64, ColecoVision, all of those things. Nintendo, the original Nintendo. So I had become a huge fan of the Commodore 64, which was basically, the first personal computer. I mean, it didn't have the computing power that you would even imagine a personal computer having today. It was basically a glorified gaming system, but it allowed you to actually had a keyboard, and you would be able to type in commands, and you'd actually load your games by typing in the string of commands, and it gave the perception, at least at that age, that you were actually doing some kind of high-end computing. Looking back now, it's comical, but you thought so at that time.
No, I remember when I was a kid, my neighbors down the street, we called them the brothers because there were 4 boys and 2 girls with 2 sets of twins, but we called them the brothers. I would go down to their house, and their dad worked in computers, and they had a Commodore 64 set up in the kitchen, and I had no idea what this was. I knew what Nintendo was, but back before that, I had no idea. We used to play this game on the Commodore 64 where you would type in coordinates and throw. You were like on a cityscape, and you would throw things at the other player to try to make them blow up.
Right.
Like it. I mean, it's that level of like, oh, so you type in this thing, it takes it as an input, and then it shows you a picture of what might have happened.
Right. Especially a lot of the early games were just text-based. Like there was a game called Zork that I remember playing on Commodore 64 that was just text-based. And you would literally type in, walk 10 feet. And then it would come up with just a sentence saying, you are now in front of a doorway. And you would type in, open the door. And then the door is open. Inside you see a table and chairs. Like it was that basic. But it felt at the time, like you were this master computer technician, like you were doing something that nobody else understood. Like parents would look at this and it's like, it's magic. And then later on in my teenage years, you were able to actually get on It wasn't even the internet. It was the pre-internet, as it was. I had this 300 baud modem that was literally a cartridge the size of like a battery, a car battery that you would plug into your Commodore 64, and it would make this horrendous sound, and you would log into basically what were these basically forums, like Usenet groups. And, again, I'm talking to some guy across the world, and this is crazy. I can't believe I can do this. I've typed one sentence, and, 45 minutes later, I get another sentence back. Hi. You wait, click, 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 click. Oh, 5 minutes later, hi. It's like, this is incredible. So the allure of that, the technology of that was big to me, especially when it started to hook into my fandoms. So by that time, I'd gotten to Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd gotten to a lot of fantasy stuff. And now they started to come out with, D&D games for the computer, not D&D per se, but fantasy games. There was superhero games. And it just even made it all more magical. Like now, at that time, especially, we had so little content. We had like the Superman movies and the Hulk television show and like Wonder Woman television show and not much more. So now that the fact that your superheroes or your fantasy characters got to come to life sort of on these 8-bit video games or even in these text-based games, again, just drew me into that world a little bit more. So I love the gameplay of it, which is so incredible because today I am not a gamer. Like you would think I would have fallen in love with video games so much because it was a big part of my teenage years that all these years later I'd be like game. I don't even know what the term is for a person who plays video games all the time. Gamer, but like I want to say like a tech head, but that's not it. I don't know what it is. I'm showing my age. But I didn't really want to get into IT. Like I wasn't super curious about what it all made it work, the bits and bytes of it, as it were. Like didn't really interest me. But when it came time for me to decide a career, like high school was coming to an end, and now it's the time where you need to make your way in the world. I did have some thoughts about like I would love to do comics, and I would love to do movies, and I would love to do televisions. Like these are all the things that I loved. But it was at a time where those things just seemed so unreachable. There was no resources, absolutely zero resources on how to get into any of these industries. Gaming, comic books, TV, film. There was no schools. There was no, let me talk to somebody at SVA, or it just didn't exist. And when you would ask people about it, they were like, oh, there might be, a class at NYU in the back building in the bowels of some study hall that nobody ever goes into, type of thing, with the crazy old professor shows you old film reels. Like it was not a thing. So I quickly passed over that idea. Like it just was like, it's an impossibility. I don't know how people get there. There's some magic to people getting there. But I don't know it, and I don't know anybody who does know it. So, I got to find a job. And again, it was the dawn of the technology age, really. Computers were getting, to be a part of our everyday lives to some respect. Not home computing per se, but, there was all of a sudden there was ATMs, which, didn't exist before. And you would go into a store and, there might be a computerized register. And my mom was really like, well, computers are the future. You got to go into computers. That's where the money is going to be. And I was like, I kind of liked it. It seemed kind of interesting. And, my mother and at the time my stepfather were kind of like, yeah, that's what you're going to do. And I was like, okay. Yep. Yeah, all right. I'll do that. I had no other ideas. All I wanted to do was read comics and play with toys. Still at 18 years old. So I was like, okay. I was like, that's what we'll do. And so I actually, I had been an honor student since the 4th grade. I had actually even skipped the 8th grade. That's how advanced I had gotten. So truthfully, at 17, I was ready to go to college. and we found a bunch of the best technology schools that we can think of, and one was right in Hoboken, New Jersey, Stevens Institute of Technology, which is still there. It's been